2.2. Bhumakant. This chapter contains 6 sections. 2.2.1 Different types of sin and virtue. Once, Yayati requested Matali to describe the various sinful and virtuous deeds, which a man normally commits in his life. Matali replied, one who criticizes the Vedas and follows the religion of others after abandoning his own or torments virtuous people is a grave sinner. Similarly, not respecting one's parents, not giving dakshina to a Brahmin after the completion of a Shraddha ceremony, studying the scriptures in an impure physical state or some Anyo Bhadraha Kritavayo Yantu Vishwadaha, let noble thoughts come from every side, RG Veda. Vishva Dharma Ki Jai. Victory to universal Dharma. Other sinful deeds. One who obstructs a hungry man from having his food or thirsty person from quenching his thirst commits a sin similar to that of killing a Brahmin. Matali describes some other types of sins: backbiting, seeing faults with others and demeaning their efforts, acquiring others' land by unfair means, killing innocent animals, having illicit relationship with women other than one's wife, telling lies, showing disrespect to the guests, etc., are considered to be sinful deeds. Describing about the various types of virtuous deeds, Matali said, non-violence, forgiveness, truthfulness, devotion towards God, benevolence, abstinence, oblation and meditation are some of the virtuous deeds. Donating food, grains, domesticated animals like horse, cow, etc., giving water to a thirsty person are some other types of virtuous deeds. A person who donates wooden sandals a needy Brahmin attains to the heaven. Worshipping Lord Shiva or Lord Vishnu enables a man to attain to the Shivaloka or Vishnuloka respectively. 2.2.2 King Yayati propagates Vaishnava Dharma. King Yayati was the son of Nahush and a descendant of Soma dynasty. He was a great devotee of Lord Vishnu and had contributed a lot in the propagation of Vaishnava Dharma. Yayati had sent many emissaries in all directions to propagate Vaishnava Dharma. During Yayati's reign his subjects were prosperous and were free from any kind of sorrow. Peace prevailed everywhere and people did not experience any natural calamity like drought or famine. King Yayati enjoyed an unbelievably long life of 1,00,000 years. He was blessed with eternal youth and his appearance was enough to give an inferiority complex to a young man. All this he had attained by the virtue of his supreme devotion towards Lord Vishnu. Indra was very scared of Yayati's increasing popularity and feared that if his virtuosity remained intact, he would very soon become the ruler of heaven. Indra instructed Kamadeva and Rati to find some means so that King Yayati could be enticed by human weaknesses like lust and infatuation. Kamadeva, accompanied by other Gandharvas, went to Yayati's palace and sought his permission to stage a play. Yayati gave his permission and the play commenced. Rati appeared on the stage as a beautiful woman and was successful in corrupting the thoughts of Yayati. Yayati became so enchanted by Rati's beauty that he lost his senses and fell down unconscious. Finding the time opportune, Vridavastha, deity of old age, and Kamadeva entered Yayati's body. This way the deities were successful in their designs and now the signs of old age started to become evident in Yayati. 2.2.3 Yayati marries Ashrubandhumati. Once, King Yayati went into a forest for hunting. He saw a stag, which had 4 horns and chased it. The deer led him deep into the forest and then disappeared. Yayati was tired and thirsty. He saw a lake and decided to quench his thirst. First of all he took his bath and then drank sweet water from the lake. As Yayati was relaxing at the bank of that lake, he heard a sweet voice singing a song. Yayati proceeded towards the direction from which the sound was coming. He saw a beautiful woman singing a song. Her companion accompanied the beautiful woman. Yayati became enchanted by the divine beauty of that woman and wanted to marry her. The beautiful woman's companion told Yayati that her friend could marry him only after he shed the signs of his old age. The beautiful woman was Ashrubandhumati, the daughter of Rati. Vishala, her companion, was the daughter of Varun. Yayati returned to his palace and requested his 2 sons, Taru and Yadu, to exchange their youth in lieu of his old age, but both of them refused to oblige him. Yayati cursed both of them. Yayati had a son, Puru, from his wife named Sharmashtha. When he made the same request to Puru, he agreed without any hesitation. Yayati became pleased with Puru and appointed him as his successor. Anyo Bhadraha Kritavayo Yantu Vishwadaha, let noble thoughts come from every side, RG Veda. Vishva Dharma Ki Jai. Victory to universal Dharma. Now, Yayati became young once again and went to meet Ashrubandhumati. But, Ashrubandhumati's friend, Vishala was still not convinced and expressed apprehension that her friend would never play second fiddle to his two wives, Sharmishtha and Devayani. King Yayati, being blinded by his lust, assured Vishala that Ashrubandhumati would enjoy the supreme authority and she had nothing to fear. He said, I promise that you will be my only wife and I will have nothing to do with my wives. This way Yayati married Ashrubandhumati and enjoyed a blissful married life for 20,000 years. Once, Ashrubandhumati expressed her desire of visiting all the divine places, Indraloka, Brahmaloka, Shivaloka and Vishnuloka. Yayati took back his old age from Puru and returned his youth. He appointed Puru as his successor and instructed his subject to live peacefully. But, the people wanted to be with Yayati, so all of them accompanied him to the heaven. Yayati visited all the divine places and ultimately attained to Vishnuloka. 2.2.4 Kunjal, the enlightened parrot. Once, while describing about the importance of a teacher, Lord Vishnu had narrated the following tale to King. Then, sage Chiyavan came from the lineage of Bhargav. Once, he arrived at Omkareshwar with the objective of acquiring knowledge. Since he was tired, he decided to take rest under the shade of a banyan tree. A parrot named Kunjal lived on that tree. The parrot had 4 young ones, Ujjawal, Samujwal, Vijwal and Kapinjal. Kunjal was a very learned parrot and had mastery over all the scriptures. Once, Ujjawal requested Kunjal to give discourse on various aspects of religiousness. Kunjal said, the whole world is full of sorrow. A man can be liberated from his sorrow by the means of salvation because salvation is free from sorrow. Salvation can be attained with the help of abstinence, self-control and having deep devotion in Lord Vishnu. The soul being enlightened is also called Paramatma. But, covered by the darkness of ignorance, it becomes difficult for the soul to attain salvation. A devotee can meditate on both the forms of Lord Vishnu, Sakar, with form, and Nirakar, formless. But, meditating on the Sakar form is easy for anybody. On the other hand, only an enlightened soul can meditate on the Nirakar form of Lord Vishnu. There are various austerities related with Lord Vishnu and which, if observed by a devotee, pleases him: Jaya, Vijaya, Janti, Vanjuli, Tilganda, Trisprisha, Akshanda and Manaraksha. All these austerities are similar to different types of Ekadashi or Dwadashi Vrata. Similarly, 2 other austerities, namely Ashunyashayan and Janmashtami, are capable of freeing a man from all his sin. A devotee who chants Shatnam Stotra attains salvation. 2.2.5 Kunjal preaches Vijwal. Describing the virtue of benevolence to Vijwal. Kunjal, the learned parrot, narrated the following tale. Once, there lived a king named Subahu who ruled over Chola Desha. A learned Brahmin named Jaimini used to counsel him on religious and spiritual matters. One day, while Jaimini was giving a discourse on the virtue of benevolence, Subahu requested him to describe about those deeds that enables a man either to attain to the heaven or to hell. Jaimini replied, one who earns his livelihood by improper means definitely goes to hell. Similarly, atheists, licentious people, proudy, backbiters and ungrateful people go to hell too. One who gobbles up others' wealth by illegal means or shows disrespect to his guest goes to hell. One who is a habitual liar or one who kills innocent animals or one who has abandoned the religious path is certain to go to hell. One who is truthful and engages himself in various virtuous deeds like penance, meditation, study of the scriptures, goes to the heaven. One who is respectful towards his elders and leads a virtuous life goes to the heaven. In the same manner, he who is benevolent and free from vices like jealousy, hatred, etc. goes to the heaven. Similarly, one who leads his life as per the instructions given in the scriptures or has full control over his sensual desires goes to the heaven. King Subahu was so impressed by Jaimini's preaching that he decided to spend rest of his life in the service of Lord Madhusudan. He performed countless oblations as long as he was alive and attained to Vishnuloka after his death. Anyo Bhadraha Kritavayo Yantu Vishwadaha, let noble thoughts come from every side, RG Veda. Vishva Dharma Ki Jai. Victory to universal Dharma. 2.2.6 Kunjal narrates about his previous birth. Sage Chiavan, who had been listening to the narration of Kunjal, was amazed by his profound knowledge. He asked Kunjal, "O great soul, who are you? From where did you acquire such divine knowledge?" Kunjal, who remembered everything about his previous birth, said, "In my previous birth, I was the youngest son of a Brahmin named Vidyadhar. My name was Dharma Sharma. Seeing my dislike for study, my father became worried about my future. I used to waste my time loitering here and there. People used to make fun of my stupidity, which made me extremely sad. I decided to acquire knowledge but did not find anybody willing to teach me. In due course of time I became old but was still an idiot. One day, I was sitting in a temple cursing my fate. Suddenly, a sage arrived there and asked me as to what made me so sad. I narrated my woeful tale. The sage felt pity on my condition and blessed me with divine knowledge that made me capable of having advanced knowledge of all the future incidents of the world." Sage Chiavan was curious to know about the reason that made Dharma Sharma to be born as a parrot. Kunjal replied, "O Brahman, a man is influenced by the company he keeps. The reason why I took birth as a parrot is related with an incident, which occurred in my previous birth. Once, a wicked fowler sold a parrot to a Brahmin who in turn presented it to me. With the passage of time I became very attached with the parrot and gradually deviated from my virtuous path. As a result all my divine knowledge vanished and I became an idiot once again. One day, a cat arrived and killed that parrot in my absence. I became very sad and used to spend my time crying over the dead parrot. Ultimately I died, but even at the time of death, my mind was preoccupied with the thoughts of my beloved parrot. As a result, I was born as a parrot, but fortunately I remembered my previous birth even while I was still in my mother's womb. I was full of remorse and used to curse myself for having wasted my life." Sage Chiavan was amazed by the narration of Kunjal, the learned parrot. 2.3. Swargakand. This chapter contains 5 sections. 2.3.1 Some prominent holy places in Bharatvarsha. Once, sages requested Satji to describe about the most prominent places of pilgrimage situated in Bharatvarsha. Satji commenced his narration by describing the origin of creation and then switched over to the geographical characteristics of Bharatvarsha. Satji said, "There are 7 prominent mountain ranges in Bharatvarsha: Mahendra, Malay, Saya, Shaktaman, Rikshavan, Vindhya and Parayatra. Some prominent rivers supplying potable water to the inhabitants of Bharatvarsha are Ganga, Sindhu, Saraswati, Godwari, Narmada, Shatadru, Yamuna, Vipasha, Mahanadi, Vidisham, Varuna etc. The names of the main Janapadas situated in the northern part of Bharatvarsha are Kuru, Panchal, Shalva, Matraya, Jongal, Shorsan, Pulind, Bod, Chedi, Matsya, Bhoj, Sindhu, Utkal, Koshal, Madra, Kalinga, Kashi, Malav, Magad, Viday, Anga, Banga, Saurashtra, Keke, Kashmir and Gandhar. Similarly, Janpadas like Dravid, Kerala, Prakya, Karnataka, Kuntal, Chul, Saurad, Kona, Korak, Kalad, Mushal and Sutap are situated in the southern part of Bharatvarsha." Satji then described about the greatness of Pushkar Tirth by recounting an incident related with the Pandavas. One day, sage Narad visited the Pandavas who were living in exile. The Pandavas had visited many places during the course of their exile period and wanted to know about the fruits they had acquired due to their pilgrimage. Sage Narad then recounted an incident when King Dilip had once posed the same question to Sage Vashist. Sage Vashist, while describing about the greatness of Pushkar, said, "Pushkar Tirth is the holiest place where Lord Brahma has his abode. Deities consider themselves fortunate to be at Pushkar. A person who takes a holy dip at Pushkar and worships Lord Brahma acquires virtues equivalent to the accomplishment of the Ashwamedha Yagya. Anyo Bhadraha Kritavayo Yantu Vishwadaha, let noble thoughts come from every side. RG Veda. Vishva Dharma Ki Jai. Victory to universal Dharma." Sage Vashist continued with the description of some other prominent places of pilgrimage like Jambumarg, Narmada, Amarkantak etc. 2.3.2 Jambubarg, River Narmada, Amarkantak. Continuing with his narration, Sage Vashist said, A man desirous of going on a pilgrimage should first of all visit Jambumarg, because it is revered even by the deities and the sages. By visiting this holy place a man acquires virtue equivalent to the accomplishment of an Ashwamedha yagya and attains to Vishnuloka. A man should then visit Tundalikashram, Agastya Ashram and Kanya Ashram, which are situated near Jambumarg. Taking a dip in the holy water of Kataitirth, situated near Mahakal temple, is believed to bestow undiminished virtue. Bhadravat is a famous place of pilgrimage related with Lord Shiva, and paying a visit here gives virtue equivalent to donation of 1,000 cows. A man who takes holy dip in river Narmada and performs tarpan in the name of Mains acquires fruits similar to the accomplishment of Agnishtam Yagya. Narmada is the holiest of all the river. A man becomes liberated from his sins by taking bath for 3 weeks in river Saraswati. Similarly, it takes 1 week of regular bath in river Yamuna for a man to become absolved of all his sins. The mere touch of Ganga water liberates a man from all his sins, but mere sight of river Narmada is enough to liberate a man from all his sins. Kotirudras are believed to dwell in the vicinity of Amarkantak mountain. Altogether 60 crores and 60,000 places of pilgrimage are situated all around this holy mountain. Anybody present in the vicinity of this mountain must refrain from any kind of sinful deeds. Visiting Amarkantak mountain during solar and lunar eclipses is considered to be extremely auspicious. Similarly, the confluence site of Narmada and Kaveri is considered to be sacrosanct. Anybody who takes a holy dip in the confluence of Narmada and Kaveri becomes liberated from his sins. 2.3.3 Dharma Tirtha and Yamuna Snan. Sage Narad continued with the description of various holy places and said, a pilgrim must visit Dharma Tirth, which is named after the Lord of Death, Dharma. Once upon a time Dharmaraj had performed an austere penance at that place. This is the reason why it became famous as Dharma Tirth. By visiting Dharma Tirth, a man liberated all his ancestors up to 7th generation. After that a pilgrim should go to Kalap forest, Sagandik forest, Suvarna Dumavanti respectively. All the above mentioned holy places are capable of giving salvation. Describing about the virtues of taking a holy dip in river Kalini, Yamuna, Sage Narad said a person who takes a holy dip in Yamuna becomes liberated from all his sorrows. The virtue acquired by taking a bath in Yamuna is greater than paying visits to various holy places like Pushkar, Kurukshetra, Brahmavarta and Kashi. Taking a dip in Yamuna also helps in the fulfillment of all the desires of a man. Although different rituals have been attributed to various yugas like Satayuga, penance, Treta, knowledge, Dwapar, Yagya and Kaliyug donation, yet virtue of taking a holy dip in Yamuna transcends even time. Although the whole stretch of river Yamuna is believed to be holy, yet Yamuna flowing near Mathura holds special importance because of her deep association with Lord Krishna. Narad narrated a tale to prove the significance of taking a bath in Yamuna. During Satyayuga there lived a Vaishya named Hemakundal. He had earned lot of wealth by dint of hard work. Although he was very rich, yet happiness deluded him, as he had no progeny. He was worried as to who would inherit his property after his death. In course of time, Hemakundal attained old age and after realizing about the impermanence of the world indulged himself in virtuous deeds. He was blessed with 2 sons, Shrikundal and Vikundal. When both his sons grew up, Hemakundal went into the forest to do penance. Sri Kundal and Hemakundal squandered the whole wealth which their father had earned so painstakingly. Both of them were of loose moral character and had illicit relationship with many prostitutes. In a very short time they became poor and both of them starved to death. When the Yamduts reached Yamloka after taking their souls, Yamraj ordered, put Sri Kundal in Raurav hell but send Vikundal to the heaven. While Vikundal was being taken to the heaven he asked one of the Yamduts, the sins committed by my brother and me were almost identical, then why is my brother being sent to hell while I am being sent to heaven? Anyo Bhadraha Kritavayo Yantu Vishwadaha, let noble thoughts come from every side, RG Veda. Vishva Dharma Ki Jai. Victory to universal Dharma. The Yamdut replied, you are being meted out this special treatment on account of your virtues acquired by bathing twice in river Yamuna. There was a Brahmin friend of yours named Swamitra. You had accompanied him to Mathura and twice taken bath in the holy Yamuna. By the virtue of the first bath you became liberated from all your sins, while the second bath helped you in attaining to the heaven. Vikundal requested the Yamdut to allow his brother to accompany him to heaven. Yamdut replied that his brother could accompany him to the heaven provided he donated all his virtues to him. Vikandal agreed to donate his virtues to his elder brother for the sake of his liberation. This way, both Shrikandal and Vikandal attained to the heaven. 2.3.4 Kashipuri, Kapardashwar and Gaya. On being asked by Yudhishthir about the grandeur of holy places like Kashipuri, Kapardashwar and Gaya, Narad said, just as Lord Mahadev is supreme among all the deities, in the same manner Kashipuri holds a significant status among all the places of pilgrimage. Hence an individual should make it a point to visit Kashi once in his lifetime. The famous Shiva Linga Kapardashwar is installed at Kashi and is said to fulfill all the desires of a man. Performance of various rituals at Kashi liberates a man from all his sins. All his flaws are eliminated automatically just by residing in Kashi. A devotee who regularly practices meditation in the temple of Lord Kapardashwar attains yogasiddhi within 6 months. Worshipping Lord Kapardashwar after taking a holy dip in Pishak Mochan Kunda liberates a man from gravest of sin like Brahmahatya, etc. Gaya is considered to be a sacrosanct place of pilgrimage and various rituals for the pacification of the souls of dead ancestors are performed here. Anybody who offers Pindadan and Tarpan at Gaya not only liberates his ancestors but also himself. There is a very famous banyan tree named Akshavat at Gaya. Gaya is situated at the bank of river Falgu. 2.3.5 Puranas, the embodiment of Sri Hari. According to Satji, all the Puranas are nothing but the mediums through which Sri Hari manifests himself. Brahma Puran is said to be the forehead of Sri Hari, Padma Puran is said to be the heart of Sri Hari, Vishnu Puran is said to be the right arm of Sri Hari. Shiva Puran is said to be the left arm of Sri Hari. Srimad Bhagavat is said to be his thigh. Narad Puran is said to be his navel. Markandeya Puran is said to be his right foot. Agni Puran is said to be his left foot. Bhavish Puran is said to be his right knee. Brahma Vavratapuran is said to be his left knee. Linga Puran is said to be his right ankle. Varaha Puran is said to be his left ankle. Skanda Puran is said to be the hair on the body of Sri Hari. Vaman Puran is said to be his skin. Kurma Puran is said to be his back. Matsya Puran is said to be his stomach. Garuda Puran is said to be his bone narrow. Brahmanda Puran is said to be his bone. So, all the Puranas being manifestation of different parts of Sri Hari's body are very sacred and capable of bestowing salvation. 2.4. Patakhand. This chapter contains 10 sections. 2.4.1 Sheshnag narrates the tales of Sri Rama's return from Lanka. Once, sages requested Satji to describe about Sri Ram's return from Lanka. Satji narrated the same tale, which Sheshnag had once told Vatsyayan. Sheshnag said, after the killing of demon king Ravan, Sri Ram appointed Vibhishan as the king of Lanka. He then decided to return to Ayodhya on Pushpak Viman, which Vibhishan had presented to him. He along with Sita, Laxman, Sugriv and Hanuman boarded the aircraft and flew towards Ayodhya. The earth looked beautiful from such a high altitude and Sri Ram was continuously describing about the importance of various places over which the aircraft flew. As the aircraft was about to enter the airspace of Ayodhya, Sri Ram recognized Bharat, who was living at Nandigram at that time. Bharat had vowed not to enter. Anyo Bhadraha Kritavayo Yantu Vishwadaha, let noble thoughts come from every side, RG Veda. Vishva Dharma Ki Jai. Victory to universal Dharma. Ayodhya till the return of Sri Ram, hence he stayed at Nandigram situated at the outskirts of Ayodhya awaiting Sri Ram's return. He led an austere life as the result of which he had become weak and feeble. On seeing Bharat, Sri Ram instructed Hanuman to inform him about his Ram's arrival. Hanuman went to the hermitage of Bharat and informed him about Sri Ram's arrival. Bharat's joy knew no bound and he expressed his desire to reward Hanuman for bringing such auspicious news. Bharat then accompanied Hanuman and went to meet Sri Ram. Sri Ram's heart was filled with grief when he saw Bharat, who looked like a hermit in his Valkal and Kapan. On the other hand, Bharat cursed himself for being the cause of Sri Ram's miseries. Bharat asked for Sri Ram's forgiveness and said, O Lord, you had to go into exile only because of me. I can never be absolved of my sin. Sri Ram consoled him and after taking Bharat into his embrace inquired about his welfare. He told Bharat that he had to undergo the sufferings of exile because of his own destiny. You are not at fault. Don't curse yourself for my misery, said Sri Ram. At last all of them including Bharat boarded Pushpak Viman and the aircraft took off for Ayodhya. Continuing with Sri Ram's tale, Sheshnag said, when Sumant brought the news of Sri Ram's arrival at Ayodhya, people danced in joy. Preparations started being made for Sri Ram's grand reception. The whole city of Ayodhya was decorated with rows of lighted lamps. Sri Ram and Sita alighted from the Pushpak Viman and both of them were carried in a palanquin to the palace. People stood in queues on both sides of the road with folded hands. Sri Ram blessed them by raising his hand. First of all Ram went to meet Kaikeyi who was full of remorse and guilt. Sri Ram consoled her and then went to meet Sumitra to pay his obeisance to her. At last, he went to meet his own mother, Kaushalya, who was dying to see him. Kaushalya blessed Sri Ram, Sita and Laxman. Bharat then instructed the royal astrologers to decide upon an auspicious moment for Sri Ram's coronation. Thus Sri Ram became the king of Ayodhya. During his reign peace and prosperity prevailed everywhere. People were virtuous and there was no sign of sin. 2.4.2 Ravana, the mighty demon. People of Ayodhya lived peacefully during Sri Ram's reign until one fateful day when they were struck by a bad news. Sri Ram had abandoned Sita after a washerman leveled an unfair charge against her character. Such was the greatness of Sri Ram that opinion of each and every individual was given due respect irrespective of his position and status. One day, sage Agastya arrived in the royal court of Sri Ram. After the formal salutations were over, sage Agastya complimented Sri Ram for killing Ravana. Sri Ram asked Agastya, who was Ravana, the tormentor of deities. I am anxious to know about the origin of his whole clan. Sage Agastya replied, Vishrava was the grandson of Lord Brahma. His father was sage Pulastya. Vishrava had two wives, Mandakini and Kaikasi. Mandakani's son was Kubera while Kaikasi was the mother of Ravana. Kumbhakarna and Vibhishan. Kubera ruled over Lanka. One day, Kubera came to see his parents boarded on his aircraft, Pushpak Viman. After he returned to Lanka, Ravana, who was very much impressed by Kubera's royal appearances asked Kaikasi, who was this fellow? From where did he acquire such an amazing aircraft? Kaikasi revealed to Ravana that the guest was none other than his step-brother Kubera. She said, Kubera is the son of your step-mother, Mandakini. He has made his mother proud by his conduct but I am ashamed of you, because of your inconsequential existence. You are no better than a worm. Ravan decided to prove his mother wrong by acquiring insurmountable power and authority. Ravana went to the forest and performed an austere penance for 10,000 years by standing on one foot. He fixed his gaze at the sun and never for a moment did he remove his gaze from it. Kumbhakarna and Vibhishan also engaged themselves in austere penance. At last, Lord Brahma became pleased and blessed Ravana with a vast kingdom. Ravan then started tormenting his step-brother Kumbhakarna. He snatched Kubera's Pushpak Viman and drove him out of Lanka. Ravan then turned his attention towards the deities and drove them out of heaven. The deities went to seek the help of Lord Brahma who in turn took them to Lord Shiva. Even Lord Shiva was clueless about the means by which the indomitable Ravana could be subdued. Ultimately all of them including Lord Shiva went to Lord Vishnu and sought his help. Lord Vishnu assured them by saying, I shall take incarnation as Ram at a place called Ayodhya. Presently, Ayodhya is being ruled by Dashrath, who in spite of having 3 queens, does not have any son. I shall manifest myself as Ram. Anyo Bhadraha Kritavayo Yantu Vishwadaha, let noble thoughts come from every side, RG Veda. Vishva Dharma Ki Jai. Victory to universal Dharma. Don't worry. I shall eliminate the menace called Ravana. Sage Agastya also told Sri Ram that Ravana belonged to the caste called Brahmrakshas. This way, Sage Agastya after having finished his narration looked at Sri Ram anticipating further queries. 2.4.3 Agastya advises Sri Rama to perform Ashvamedya Yagya. Sri Ram requested Sage Agastya to tell about the means by which he could become liberated from the sins of killing Brahmins. Sage Agastya advised him to perform Ashwamedha Yagya. He also described the rituals of performing Ashwamedha Yagya. Get a horse of white color and after worshipping it on Vaishak Purnima leave it to wander freely. Tie a piece of paper on its forehead on which your name and other details are mentioned. Soldiers should follow that horse wherever it goes. You should fight a battle against any king who dares to stop the horse. You should lead a celibate life till the horse returns back to the same place from where it had been let loose. It is customary for the performer of Ashwamedha Yagya to indulge himself in benevolent deeds till the completion of Ashwamedha Yagya. Sri Ram agreed to perform Ashwamedha Yagya. He went to the seashore accompanied by numerous sages. He then cultivated a vast expanse of land with the help of a golden plough. A large oblation site was constructed and thus began Ashwamedha Yagya under the supervision of Vashist. 2.4.4 The horse is let loose. As per the advice of sage Vashist, Sri Ram instructed his soldiers to bring a white horse. A white parasol was fixed on its back and the horse was decorated with colorful clothes. The horse was then let loose and the faithful soldiers of Sri Ram followed it wherever the horse went. A gold sheet was hanged in the horse's neck and upon which was inscribed, "This horse belongs to Sri Ram, the son of Dasharatha. Anybody who dares to stop this horse will meet ruthless punishment." Shatrughan followed the horse as per the instruction of his elder brother, Sri Ram. Bharat and Pushkal also accompanied him. A huge army led by Kalnami was marching behind the horse. 2.4.5 Lav fastens the horse. Some of the kings tried to stop the horse, but were defeated by Shatrughan. This way the horse continued to move ahead without any problem till it reached the bank of river Ganga. It was early morning and Lav after noticing the presence of horse became curious. He went near the horse and tried to read the inscription hanging down its neck. He made fun of the might of Sri Ram and fastened the horse. The soldiers tried to release the horse but Lav severed their arms. They returned to Shatrughan and narrated the whole incident to him. 2.4.6 Lav vanquishes the whole army. Shatrughan became extremely furious after seeing the condition of his injured soldiers. He instructed Kalnami to teach Lav a lesson. Kalnami confronted Lav with a huge army and a ferocious battle took place. Lav managed to kill Kalnami, which created havoc in the rival's army. The surviving soldiers tried to hold their ground but were forced to flee on account of a fierce assault from Lav. Shatrughan then ordered Pushkal to fight Lav but he became unconscious after being hit by Lav's arrow. Now, Shatrughan's anger crossed all limits and he ordered Hanuman to kill Lav. Hanuman uprooted a large tree and tried to hit Lav, but Lav cut the tree into 100 pieces with a volley of arrows. Lav then released many arrows in the direction of Hanuman. Hanuman fought valiantly but ultimately he fell down unconscious. 2.4.7 Lav becomes unconscious. When Shatrughan learnt about Hanuman's fate he was infuriated and went to fight Lav. But when he saw a tender-looking child in front of him he was surprised. Shatrughan asked, "O brave child! Who are you? Who is your father?" But Lav was not interested in his irrelevant queries and challenged him for a duel. Shatrughan was left with no other option but to fight. A tremendous battle was fought between them. Shatrughan released Anyo Bhadraha Kritavayo Yantu Vishwadaha, let noble thoughts come from every side, RG Veda. Vishva Dharma Ki Jai. Victory to universal Dharma. Volleys of arrow towards Lav but all of them were neutralized by him. For a brief time Shatrughan lost his consciousness. After regaining his consciousness, he aimed his most lethal weapon towards Lav. The arrow hit Lav and he fell down unconscious. Lav's companions went and informed Sita about the whole incident. Kush came forward to fight against Sri Ram's army. When he reached the battlefield he saw Lav who was held captive by the enemy's armies. By that time, Lav had regained his consciousness and after seeing Kush he somehow managed to free himself from the clutches of his captors. Now, both the brothers launched a fierce attack on the enemy. The whole army of Sri Ram started running helter and skelter. It did not take much time for Lav and Kush to vanquish the whole army. All the great warriors like Hanuman, Sugriva, Pushkal, Angad Virmani and even Shatrughan were either held captive or injured in the battle. Both the brothers fastened Hanuman and Sugriva with ropes and took them to Sita. Sita immediately recognized Hanuman and Sugriva. She instructed both her sons to set them free as well as the horse. Lav and Kush followed the instruction of Sita and released everybody from their captivity. Sita then whispered, "May all the dead soldiers become alive." Her words came true and all the dead soldiers became alive once again. Shatrughan regained his consciousness too. 2.4.8 The army returns to Ayodhya. Shatrughan decided to return to Ayodhya. He instructed Samadhi to make all the necessary arrangements for the safe return of the caravan, which comprised not only of Sri Ram's army but also of all the defeated kings and their vanquished armies. When Sri Ram came to know about their arrival, he sent Laxman to receive them. Laxman received the victorious army with all the honor and all of them came to the palace. Sri Ram curiously asked Samadhi about everything that had happened. Samadhi paraded all the vanquished kings who had made the mistake of stopping the horse, Sumit, Sabahu, Daman, Satyavan, Surath, etc. He then narrated the brave deed of Lav and Kush. He also revealed how mighty warriors like Hanuman, Sugriva, Shatrughan, etc. had been defeated by both of them. 2.4.9 Sri Rama sends Laxman to bring Sita. Sage Valmiki was present in Ayodhya to attend the Ashwamedha Yagya. Sri Ram asked him about the identity of the two children, Lav and Kush. Valmiki said, "Sita was pregnant at the time you had abandoned her. I gave her refuge in my hermitage where she gave birth to twins, Lav and Kush. Both the children were brought up in my hermitage with love and care. I taught them all the sacred texts and scriptures and made them masters of various weaponries. So, Lav and Kush are your sons. You must bring Sita back to Ayodhya with due honor, because she is pure and chaste. Moreover, your whole army owe its life to her." Sri Ram's heart was filled with grief. He instructed Laxman to bring Sita along with Lav and Kush. Laxman went to Valmiki's hermitage and requested Sita to return to Ayodhya. Sita refused to return but sent Lav and Kush along with Laxman. When Sri Ram found that only Lav and Kush had come, he once again sent Laxman to bring Sita. Laxman followed his instruction and went to Valmiki's hermitage for the second time. Meanwhile, Valmiki instructed Lav and Kush to sing the praise of Sri Ram in their melodious voice. Everybody was moved by their soulful rendition. Sri Ram took Lav and Kush in his embrace. 2.4.10 Sita returns to Ayodhya. Sri Ram eulogized all the revered sages who had arrived to attend the Ashwamedha Yagya. The holy water of Saryu was brought and sprinkled in the Yagya Kund where Ashwamedha Yagya was being performed, amidst the chanting of Vedic mantras. Hardly had Sri Ram touched the horse with his hands than it transformed into a human being. Everybody was amazed by this incident. Sri Ram asked that man as to how he had attained the form of a horse. The man revealed to the assembled people that he had become a horse due to Durvasa's curse. Later on sage Durvasa had mercy on me and assured, Anyo Bhadraha Kritavayo Yantu Vishwadaha, let noble thoughts come from every side, RG Veda. Vishva Dharma Ki Jai. Victory to universal Dharma. That I would regain my human form by the divine touch of Sri Ram. Having said this, the man attained to the heaven. In course of time Sri Ram organized 2 more Ashwamedha Yagyas and his glory reverberated through all the 3 worlds. 2.5. Uttarkhand. This chapter contains 23 sections. 2.5.1 Badrak Ashram. Once, on being asked by the sages about the greatness of Badrakashram, Satji narrated the same tale, which Lord Shiva had once told sage Narad. Lord Mahadeva had told Narad that altogether there were 1,25,000 mountains and Badrakashram was supreme among them. Lord Mahadeva said, Badrakashram is the abode of Lord Naranarayan. Narayan, the origin of all creations, has 4 arms and his complexion is dark. Narayan manifests himself in both forms, Sakar as well as Nirakar. He is the eternal Purusha and is worshipped by people during the full period of Uttarayan. Since Badrakashram is covered with snow during the period of Dakshinayan, Narayan is not worshipper during these 6 months. All the deities dwell at Badrakashram. The sages live in their hermitages at Badrakashram. River Alananda flows at Badrakashram. Anybody taking a dip in the holy water of Alananda becomes liberated from his sins. 2.5.2 The descent of River Ganga. Describing about the reason why River Ganga was brought down on the earth, Lord Mahadeva told Narad, King Bhagirath was the architect of Ganga's arrival on the earth. He wanted to liberate his dead ancestors from the curse of sage Kapil. King Sagar came from the lineage of the famous king, Harishchandra. Sagar had two queens. The elder queen had 60,000 sons while the younger queen had just one, Panchajan. Panchajan's son was Anshuman, who himself was the father of Dilip. Dilip was the father of Bhagirath. Bhagirath did an austere penance on the Himalayas for 10,000 years. As a result, River Ganga descended on the earth. I, Shiva, held her in the locks of my hair and she remained there for 10,000 more years. Bhagirath requested me to release Ganga so that his ancestors could be liberated. I agreed to release Ganga and Bhagirath took her to the Pataloka where his ancestors had been charred to death due to Kapil's curse. Bhagirath sprinkled the water of Ganga on the ashes of his ancestors and each of them attained salvation as a result. Eventually, Ganga resurfaced at Haridwar, the most sacred place of pilgrimage. 2.5.3 Dasharatha pacifies Shani. Sage Narad curiously asked Lord Mahadeva as to what made Shani such a volatile planet. Lord Mahadeva replied, Shani is extremely violent by nature and everybody is scarred of this planet. Once, the royal astrologer of Dasharath was petrified at the prospect of Shani entering the constellation of Rahini and warned him of its dire consequences. If the Shani is not prevented from entering Rahini, then famine would occur lasting for more than 12 years, said the royal astrologers. Dasharath went above the sky to subdue the might of Shani well armed with divine weapons. Shani became terrified on seeing Dasharath in such a menacing mood and expressed his willingness to fulfill his desires. 2.5.4 Qualities of a Vaishnava. Giving a detailed description of the qualities of a Vaishnava, Lord Mahadeva told Narad, a person who has total devotion in Lord Vishnu is called a Vaishnava. He is truthful, kind and forgiving by nature. He engages himself in austere penance and refrains from any kind of violence. He wears a tulsi bead in his neck and puts on tilak. He is well versed in sacred text like the Vedas, Purans etc. The mere sight of a Vaishnava is enough to liberate a sinner from all his sins. Feeding a Vaishnava bestows virtue equivalent to feeding thousands of ordinary Brahmins. Anyo Bhadraha Kritavayo Yantu Vishwadaha, let noble thoughts come from every side, RG Veda. Vishva Dharma Ki Jai. Victory to universal Dharma. 2.5.5 Indraprastha. The sages inquired from Satji about the holiest city situated on the banks of river Yamuna. Satji narrated the tale which sage Saubhari had once told Yudhishthir. Once, Narad and Parvat were traveling through an aerial route. While they were flying over Kandav forest, they were lured by the beautiful sight of river Yamuna. They decided to take rest for a while. Both of them descended down and entered river Yamuna to take their bath. Meanwhile, King Shibi who ruled over Ushanar saw them. He eagerly waited at the bank of Yamuna. When Narad and Parvat emerged out of the Yamuna, they found King Shibi eagerly waiting for them. Meanwhile King Shibi had noticed the remains of numerous Havankundas oblation altars spread in a large area. After the formal exchanges of pleasantries were over, King Shibi asked Narad about those Havankundas. Narad replied, during ancient times Indra had performed numerous yagyas at this place to express his gratitude to Lord Vishnu, with whose blessings he had regained the heaven from the clutches of Hiranyakashipu. In course of time, this place became famous as Indraprastha. This sacrosanct place is holier than all the holy places combined together. Indraprastha is spread in the area of 1 yojan from east to west and 4 yojans from north to south. 2.5.6 Vakanth, the abode of Lord Vishnu. Describing about the grandeur of Vakanth, Lord Mahadeva told Parvati, a person who has total devotion in Lord Vishnu attains to Vakanth after his death. Vaikantha is the abode of Vishnu and constitutes of numerous Janapadas. The magnificence of Vakanth is beyond description and it houses many grand palaces fully decorated with jewels and diamonds. The central part of Vaikantha is called Ayodhya and is well protected by Dwarpals named Chanda, Prachanda, Bhadra, Subhadra, Jaya, Vijay, Dada and Vedata. Vakanth is inhabited by countless divine people who live in well-illuminated houses. In the central part of Ayodhya is situated the Antapuri of Lord Vishnu. It is inhabited by celestial beauties, apsaras. There is a divine canopy situated just at the center of Antapuri, where Lord Vishnu has his divine throne. The divine throne is surrounded by deities as well as by the embodiments of all the four Vedas, Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda and Atharvaveda. The deities, Agni, Surya and Chandrama have their dwellings at the center of Vishnu's throne. There is a grand pedestal called Yogapith established on the throne. A beautiful lotus flower is established on the Yogapith on which is seated Lord Vishnu along with his consort Lakshmi. Lord Vishnu appears divine in his complexion of a blue lotus, whose radiance is enough to subdue crores of sun. He has radiant ear rings hanging down his earlobes. His forehead is covered with curly hair. He has the famous Kaustubh Mani in his neck. He holds a conch and a chakra in each of his two hands, and the remaining two hands are in the posture of giving blessings. 2.5.7 The incarnations of Matsya and Kurma. Once, Goddess Parvati expressed her desire to know about all the incarnations of Lord Vishnu. Lord Mahadeva replied, Lord Brahma had created numerous Prajapatis like Bhrigu, Marichi, Atri, Daksha, Kardam, Pulastya, Pulaha, Angira and Kratu. Marichi was the father of Kashyap. Sage Kashyap had four wives, Aditi, Diti, Kadru and Vinta. Aditi was the mother of deities while Diti gave birth to demons like Makar, Hayagriva, Mahabali, Hiranyaksha, Hiranyakashipu Jamba, Maya etc. Makar was a mighty demon, who after deceitfully acquiring the Vedas from Lord Brahma had hidden himself inside an ocean. Lord Brahma requested Vishnu to liberate the sacred Vedas from the possession of Makar. Lord Vishnu then took the incarnation of Matsya and after killing Makar gave back the Vedas to Lord Brahma. Durvasa was the son of sage Atri. Once, he went to Indraloka to see Indra. At that time, Indra was planning to go out somewhere. Durvasa presented a garland of parijat flowers to Indra. Indra, after receiving the garland from Durvasa, kept it carelessly on the forehead of his elephant Airavat. This garland was trampled under its feet by the Anyo Bhadraha Kritavayo Yantu Vishwadaha, let noble thoughts come from every side, RG Veda. Vishva Dharma Ki Jai. Victory to universal Dharma. Elephant, which infuriated sage Durvasa. He cursed Indra by saying, immense prosperity has made you arrogant. But you will become a pauper within a very short time. Durvasa's words came to be true, and Indra found that not only the heaven but all the three worlds had become bereft of goddess Lakshmi. Prosperity vanished and poverty prevailed everywhere. The deities became worried and went to take the help of Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma took the deities to Lord Vishnu. Lord Vishnu became pleased with their eulogy and said, I will take incarnation as Kurma. If the ocean were churned with the help of Mandarachal mountain and Vasuki, then goddess Lakshmi would manifest herself. I shall hold the Mandarachal mountain on my back. This way the churning of ocean commenced. The Mandarachal mountain was uprooted and placed inside the Shir Sagar, and which rested on the back of Lord Kurma. The serpent, Vasuki, was held by deities and demons on both the ends. First of all, the most venomous poison, Kalkat, emerged from the ocean. Seeing both the deities and demons unwilling to accept it, Lord Shiva drank it. After the emergence of Kalkat, goddess Daridra and Varuni manifested themselves. Similarly, Aravatelephant, Uchaishrava horse, Dhanvantari, Sarabi, cow and Parijat tree emerged from the ocean. Ultimately, goddess Lakshmi manifested herself. The deities requested her to dwell in the heart of Lord Vishnu and bless all the three worlds by her presence. Goddess Lakshmi agreed and blessed them. 2.5.8 Nri Simha Incarnation. Continuing with the various incarnations of Lord Vishnu, Lord Mahadeva told Parvati, sage Kashyap had two mighty sons from Diti, Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha. Hiranyaksha had once carried the earth to Rasatala. The deities requested Lord Vishnu to rescue the earth. Lord Vishnu took the incarnation of a boar and killed Hiranyaksha with his sharp horn. When Hiranyakshipu learnt about his brother's death, he went to Marugiri mountain and started doing penance to please me, Lord Shiva. I blessed him with immortality. Later on, Hiranyakashipu married Udanpad's daughter, Kalyani, and had a son named Prahlad from her. In spite of being born in the clan of a demon, Prahlad proved to be an extremely religious child and was a supreme devotee of Lord Vishnu. When Hiranyakshipu came to know about Prahlad's religious tendency, he tried his best to stop him from worshipping Vishnu. But all his efforts went in vain and Prahlad continued to worship Lord Vishnu. Hiranyakashipu instructed his subordinates to kill Prahlad, but each time he came out unharmed. One day, Hiranyakashipu pulled out his sword and said, "You say that Vishnu is omnipresent. Is he present in this pillar?" Having said like this, he assaulted the pillar with his sword. Suddenly, to his sheer amazement, Lord Vishnu manifested himself from that pillar in the form of Nri Simha. Hiranyakashipu had been blessed by Lord Shiva that he could be killed neither by a man nor a beast. No weapon could harm him. He could be killed neither during the day nor during the night. Hiranyakashipu had taken into consideration all the possible threat perceptions to his life and tried to become immortal. But, Lord Vishnu takes incarnation to protect the humanity whenever religiousness is under threat. This time, Lord Vishnu took incarnation as Nri Simha, partly lion and partly human, and tore apart his belly with his sharp nails. After the death of Hiranyakashipu, Prahlad was coronated as his successor. Prahlad ruled justly and his subjects were happy and satisfied. 2.5.9 Vaman Incarnation. Continuing with the various incarnations of Lord Vishnu, Lord Mahadeva told Parvati, Prahlad had a son named Virashan. The most benevolent king, Mahabahu Bali, was Virashan's son. Bali had defeated the deities and ruled over all the three worlds. Sage Kashyap commenced the most austere penance Payovrata to help the deities regain their lost kingdom, heaven, once again. He was accompanied by his wife Aditi in his penance, which lasted for 1,000 years. At last, Lord Vishnu became pleased by their penance and appeared before them. Sage Kashyap narrated the woeful tales of the deities and requested him to make Indra the lord of all the three worlds. Lord Vishnu promised that he would take incarnation as Vaman. In course of time, Aditi became pregnant and ultimately gave birth to Lord Vaman. Lord Vaman appeared in the form of a brahmachari. He wore a deer skin and carried a stick and a mekhala in both his hands. Lord Vishnu inquired, Anyo Bhadraha Kritavayo Yantu Vishwadaha, let noble thoughts come from every side, RG Veda. Vishva Dharma Ki Jai. Victory to universal Dharma. The deities about the future course of action. The deities informed him that Bali was busy performing a yagya and he would not turn down any demand made to him, because if he did so there was a fear of losing all his virtues attained by the performance of the yagya. Lord Vaman went to the oblation site where Bali was performing a yagya and demanded a small piece of land measured by his 3 steps. Bali agreed to meet the demand of his guest in spite of Shukrakarya's warning. Bali resolved to donate land by holding holy water in his palm. Now, Lord Vaman abandoned his dwarfish form and appeared in a giant form. He measured the whole earth by his first step. Lord Vishnu then measured the whole sky by his second step. The helpless Bali agreed to donate all the 3 worlds to protect his vow. Ultimately, Lord Vishnu sent Bali to the Rasatala and thus Indra became the ruler of heaven once again. 2.5.10 Sri Rama's birth. Describing about Sri Ram's incarnation, Lord Mahadeva told Parvati, once, Swayambhuva Manu had expressed his desire of having Lord Vishnu as his son, to which Lord Vishnu had agreed. During Tretayuga, Manu manifested himself as Dasharath and Vishnu kept his promise by taking birth as his son, Sri Ram. Similarly, during Dwaparyuga, Manu was born as Vasudev and Lord Vishnu kept his word by taking birth as his son, Krishna. After the completion of 1,000 divine years, Manu will be born in the village of Sambal as Harigupta and Lord Vishnu will take birth as his son, Kalki. Lord Shiva then continued with the incarnation of Sri Ram and said, Sage Vishrava was the son of Pulasia and was married to Kekashi. Ravan and Kumbhakarna were born to the couple. Sage Vishrava also had a daughter named Shurpanika and a virtuous son named Vibhishan. Ravan and Kumbhakarna did austere penance to please me, Lord Shiva. When I appeared before Ravan, he requested the boon of immortality from me. After receiving the boon, Ravan became very arrogant and started tormenting the inhabitants of all the 3 worlds. The deities became scarred and took the refuge of Lord Vishnu. Lord Vishnu assured them that he would solve their problem by taking incarnation as Sri Ram. Dasharath came from the lineage of Surya. He had 3 queens, Kaushalya, Sumitra and Kaikeyi. Once, Dasharath performed a Vaishnav yagya with the objective of acquiring a son. Lord Vishnu appeared and assured him that he would take incarnation as Sri Ram in a short time. Lord Vishnu gave a bowl of divine kheer to Dasharatha, which he distributed amongst his 3 queens. In course of time, Kaushalya gave birth to Sri Ram on the auspicious day of Kshetra Navami. The deities and the sages rejoiced at his birth. 2.5.11 Sri Rama grows up. Continuing with the tale of Sri Ram, Lord Mahadeva told Parvati, Dasharatha requested Vashistha to perform the Jatkarm Sanskar of Sri Ram. In course of time Kaikeyi gave birth to Bharat, an incarnation of Panchajanya Konk. Similarly, Sumitra gave birth to 2 sons, Laxman and Shatrughan. Laxman was the incarnation of Sheshnag while Shatrughan was the incarnation of Sudarshan Chakra. Sri Ram and his brothers received education under the guidance of sage Vashistha. In a very short time they became proficient in all the scriptures and mastered various weaponaries. Although all the 4 brothers were very close to each other, yet Laxman could not bear to live in Ram's separation even for a moment and was specially close to him. Sita manifested herself from the field while Janak was plowing it. King Janak brought up Sita with great love and care. At that time, Vishwamitra was busy performing a grand yagya at Siddhashram. But the demons created numerous problems and made it impossible for him to accomplish the yagya. Vishwamitra went to Ayodhya and requested Dasharatha to send Sri Ram and Laxman along with him so that the yagya could be accomplished without any problems. Dasharatha agreed to send Sri Ram and Laxman along with Vishwamitra. This way, Vishwamitra returned to his hermitage accompanied by both the brothers. Garuda presented a pair of bow and imperishable set of arrows to both the brothers. While staying at the hermitage Sri Ram and Laxman killed many demons like Taraka and Subahu. When Marik tried to disrupt the yagya, Sri Ram attacked him with Pavan Astra, which sent Marik flying across the seashore. Meanwhile, on learning that Janak was performing Vajapaya yagya at Janakpur, Vishwamitra took Sri Ram and Laxman to attend it. On the way Sri Ram liberated Ahalya who had turned into a rock after being cursed by her husband. After reaching Janakpur, Sri Ram broke Lord Shiva's bow and married Sita. Laxman married Urmila. Dasharatha had come to attend the marriage ceremony accompanied by Bharat and Shatrughan. Bharat was married to Mandavi while Shatrughan married Shrutkirti. Anyo Bhadraha Kritavayo Yantu Vishwadaha, let noble thoughts come from every side, RG Veda. Vishva Dharma Ki Jai. Victory to universal Dharma. Meanwhile, on learning that Sri Ram had broken Shiva's bow, Parshuram arrived there and challenged him, but ultimately Parashuram realized about the divinity of Sri Ram and accepted his superiority. At last, Sri Ram, Laxman, Bharat and Shatrughan returned to Ayodhya along with their respective consorts. 2.5.12 Sri Rama's exile. Lord Mahadeva continued with the tale of Sri Ram and told Parvati, Dasharatha wanted to appoint Sri Ram as his successor but Kaikeyi did not like this idea. She wanted Bharat to be made the king of Ayodhya and Sri Ram to be sent into exile for 14 years. Once, Kaikeyi had saved Dasharatha's life while he was fighting a battle against the demons. To show his gratitude, Dasharatha had promised 2 boons to her. At that time, Kaikeyi had told Dasharatha that she would make her demand at the appropriate time. This way, Dasharatha was compelled by Kaikeyi to accept the 2 demands. As a result, Sri Ram was sent into exile. Bharat refused to become the king of Ayodhya and vowed to wait till Sri Ram returned. Dasharatha could not bear the sorrow of Ram's separation and died in his sorrow. Bharat tried his best to convince Sri Ram to change his mind and accept the throne, but Sri Ram did not listen to his request. Bharat then brought Sri Ram's wooden sandal and kept it on the throne. He vowed to spend rest of his life in austerities till Sri Ram returned. While Sri Ram was still in exile, he went to the hermitage of sage Atri and received his blessings. Atri's wife Anasua preached Sita on the virtues of chastity. Sri Ram also visited hermitages of some other prominent sages like Sharbanga, Sudiksha, Agastya etc. Once, while Sri Ram was living in Panchavati, Shurpanika arrived there. Shurpanika was Ravana's sister and wanted to marry Sri Ram, but Laxman severed her nose and ears. She went to a mighty demon named Kar and narrated her woeful tale. Kar attacked Ram with a huge army, which comprised of brave warriors like Trishira, Dushan etc. Sri Ram was victorious in this battle and Kar, Trishira and Dushan were killed. Shurpanakha went to Ravan and informed him about the misdeeds of Ram. Ravan was infuriated and wanted to take revenge. He abducted Sita with the help of Merik. When Jatayu saw Ravan carrying Sita to Lanka, he fought with valiance but was injured in the ensuing battle. Sri Ram went in search of Sita and met Jatayu, who was injured and who informed Ram that Sita had been abducted by the demon king Ravan. Sri Ram met Hanuman at the Rishyamukh mountain. Later on he befriended Sugriva on the advice of Hanuman. Sugriva had an enmity with his brother Bali. Sri Ram killed Bali and made Sugriva the king. Sri Ram requested Hanuman to find out the whereabouts of Sita. Hanuman went to Lanka and found Sita at Ashoka Vatika. He destroyed the garden and killed many demons including Ravana's son, Akshay Kumar. Ultimately, he was captured by Meghnad and taken to Ravana's court. Ravan ordered Hanuman's tail to be ignited. Hanuman then burnt the city of Lanka and returned to Sri Ram. When Sri Ram came to know about the exact location of Sita, he decided to attack Lanka with a huge army, which comprised of monkeys. The army camped at the seashore where Vibhishan came to meet him. A bridge was built across the ocean and the army reached Lanka. A fierce battle took place in which many demons were killed. At last, Ravan came forward to fight against Sri Ram but was killed. Sri Ram appointed Vibhishan as the king of Lanka and blessed him. Vibhishan presented his Pushpak Viman to Sri Ram. All of them boarded the Pushpak Viman and flew towards Ayodhya. On the way Sri Ram met Bharat who was still awaiting his arrival at Nandigram. Sri Ram was very pleased to meet Bharat. Ultimately all of them returned to Ayodhya. 2.5.13 Sri Rama's coronation. Describing the coronation of Sri Ram, Lord Mahadeva told Parvati, people of Ayodhya rejoiced at the return of Sri Ram. An auspicious day was chosen for his coronation and Sri Ram became the king of Ayodhya amidst the chantings of Vedic mantras. Sri Ram ruled over Ayodhya for 1,000 years without any problem. Meanwhile, some ignorant people started pointing out fingers at the character of Sita. Sri Ram decided to abandon Sita in the forest to quell the rumor. Sita was pregnant at that time. Feeling pity on her condition, Valmiki took her to his hermitage where Sita gave birth to Lav and Kush. Meanwhile Sri Ram decided to perform Ashwamedha Yagya at the bank of river Gomati. But, since the Anyo Bhadraha Kritavayo Yantu Vishwadaha, let noble thoughts come from every side, RG Veda. Vishva Dharma Ki Jai. Victory to universal Dharma. Yagya could not have been accomplished without Sita, therefore he performed the rituals seated beside a golden idol of Sita. In the meantime Valmiki arrived there, accompanied by Sita. He requested Sri Ram to accept Sita, vouching for her chastity. Sri Ram told Valmiki, I am confident of Sita's chastity but she will have to prove her chastity for the satisfaction of common people. Sita was deeply hurt by Sri Ram's unkind remarks. She said, May Mother Earth swallow me if I ever had thought about any man other than my Lord Sri Ram. Hardly had Sita finished her lines than the earth cracked and Sita vanished into that crevice. Sri Ram's heart was filled with remorse but thinking that it was perhaps in his destiny to live in separation with Sita, returned to Ayodhya accompanied by Lav and Kush. In course of time, Kaushalya, Sumitra and Kaikeyi left for heavenly abode. Sri Ram continued to rule Ayodhya for 10,000 more years. One day, Kala, death, arrived and reminded Sri Ram that the time had arrived for him to leave his mortal body. Meanwhile Laxman became aware of Sri Ram's decision of leaving his mortal body. He gave up his life by taking samadhi in river Saryu. Sri Ram could not bear the sorrow caused by Laxman's bereavement. He appointed Lav and Kush as the kings of Dwarawati and Kushawati respectively and decided to leave for heavenly abode. Sri Ram entered the water of river Saryu, flowing at the distance of 3 yojans from Ayodhya.